So we are coming to another highlight, and actually this is the last session of today's GNF program. And we are excited, of course, to be able to offer you an insight into something that is very recent, because it has been announced very recently only, and that is the European Space Agency Strategy 2040. And who would be better to give you an insight into this strategy than the Director General of the European Space Agency. We are honored to have you here. Please, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Christian, and I just look at the watch. I think you all wait for the drinks out there. So I promise I will be fast and speediest flying through some slides which we have prepared. But before I do that, I was so happy to listen to Australia inviting us to Sydney. Very charming. You're great guys. You have done a fantastic job. But then also Rwanda, Istanbul, Turkey, and Bosnan. I think this is really wonderful what we have ahead of us. So very briefly on ESA Strategy 2040, I all invite you to read it. It's a very exciting document. If you cannot sleep well, it's particularly good because it really makes you dream and provides you a good vision of where to go in the future. So European Space Agency, I don't need to introduce, you all know who we are and what we do. In the interest of the drinks outside, I really will skip this slide and go to the next one. Budgets of ESA, maybe just a quick word of how we spend our money. Of course, one thing is the income side, which is the biggest challenge, and we have a very big event this year, so-called ministerial conference. Every 3 years we are putting proposals on the table. Member states are subscribing. We have a very interesting scheme that we call optional programs. That means a member state can or cannot subscribe, which is quite unusual, but we have to be particularly attractive with our program proposals and discuss them well so that member states really put money into the ministerial packages. But this is the side how we spend the money. That means how it is allocated to the different domains. And as you see here, Earth observation is a very large one. Navigation, telecom, exploration, science are the key domains where we are allocating our funds and developing wonderful programs. Let me just show you some of the highlights that are happening this year. Some of it has already happened and some of it will come very soon. We have got a new member state, Slovenia. It was a beautiful ceremony having Slovenia as a new member state in ESA, the number 23, small on Earth but big in space. This is their slogan, and really very happy to have this beautiful country as a new member. We are ramping up Ariane 6. We have just had the second launch a few days ago. This was a big milestone. The second launch was flawless. Every element was really working extremely well. This was the first commercial launch, but the second launch of the rocket. The very first launch was in July last year. I'm sure all of you have followed it very closely. We're very happy and very proud that this was working so well. We're celebrating this year 50 years of ESA. 50 years of ESA is a lot of work and a lot of achievements. A lot of people working day and night to bring a lot of deliverables. Of course, we have a number of other activities and milestones that we have. But let me just point out, in the center of the slide, you see a number which says 1,500. This is the number of contracts we are signing every year, or this year, and we had a similar number last year. So now divide this number, 1,500, by 200 and something working days, divided by 8 hours per day, sometimes 10 hours per day. That means on average, we are signing a contract every hour. Every hour, a contract, and this is only the main contracts, not the CCNs, as we call it, or the add-on contracts. And of course, signing a contract means you have to write the statement of work, you have to have a DEB, a tender evaluation board, you have to write the specifications for tender, you open it, you publish it. industry is responding. We get, depending on the activity, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, sometimes 10 responses. We select in a very rigorous way. Then we negotiate, and then once negotiations are satisfactory to both parties, then we sign the contract. It's a very long and complex process, and we do this on average every hour, so you can imagine what happens in-house Visa. That means we are quite busy defining the projects, launching the competitions, signing contracts for industry then to execute the work. About 85% of our budget is allocated to industry through competition, always public open competition, which means that there's a lot of contracting going on and of course defining it and then making sure the deliverables are good and of good quality. Let me move on and show a bit the timeline of what we are doing. So you see on the left-hand side, some of it happened already. We had a very nice flyby of Bepi Colombo on Mercury. We have launched some CubeSats. We have just this ITT on the Launcher Challenge was launched on Monday, so just very recently. So we start now to procure or to put companies in competition to get new launchers on board. Eventually these launchers, of course, they will be small at the beginning. They will replace our heavy launcher Ariane 6. Of course, it takes time, probably in the next decade sometimes, but we have an open competition where we are an anchor customer. We buy a launch service. We provide the spacecraft, that means the payloads to be launched, and then obviously companies compete for that. Euclid, we have already released some data. You have seen Ariane 6-2, the first commercial launch which we had. We have ACES coming up. We have the selection of the Launcher Challenge before mid of this year. And we have an astronaut flight coming up, Swarosh from Poland on Axiom 4. And we celebrate the 50th anniversary, big event here in ESA headquarters. But actually, we have quite a number of celebrations in different countries and different places because there's a lot to celebrate, a lot of cakes to cut. The second half of this year, again, we have a number of launches. On the bottom, you see quite a few Earth observation satellites being launched. They're all big satellites, very complex ones, some of the best in their class, from Sentinels to some of the other satellites that we launched. So really quite an effort that we are investing here. Of course, they have been developed over the last couple of years. And also you see Luna, our lunar simulation facility that simulates the moon on Earth, will get a gravity system. That means the astronauts will be floating or at 1/6 gravity floating to simulate the gravity of the moon, in addition, of course, to all the other simulations that we have there with the regolith type of soil, the lights, the temperatures that we try to simulate on this facility. We will have, towards the end of this year, the first 64 flight, as we call it. That means the 4 boosters of Ariane 6. We have some other launches in between, but this will be, again, a big milestone because so far we have launched Ariane 6 with 2 boosters, and at the end of the year we will have the 4-booster configuration, of course, for more performance and different orbit configurations. The global context is challenging, is changing. I don't need to say that. You are reading it every day. You are participating in it. You are organizing, orienting yourselves to be ready for these challenges. And of course, also in ESA, this is something where we are working quite intensely with our member states. We just had an ESA Council, a very successful one last week with all our member states. And of course, the big discussion was how do we respond to the current situation in terms of security, defense budgets being built up in all the ESA member states, and how is space supporting the implementation of defense procurements in the countries, obviously space being a very fundamental element of it, from communications to navigation to Earth observation, other activities. So really, this is a big discussion we have. Of course, the other part is the economic sector. How is the economic growth going? So do we participate on this economic growth, and to what extent, and what do we need to do in order to make sure that we have services that are also creating business incomes, and therefore, obviously, for decision makers, for finance ministers are particularly of interest, because you want to create new jobs, you want to create new companies, SMEs, you want to attract funding from outside, and therefore people have to pay taxes in order to, again, create income for the economy and the country. So it's really a mix of both factors. One is the security and resilience argument, and the other one is the economic argument that we are using and putting together for our ministers. And here is one of these figures. This is showing the economic aspect of it. Of course, this may sound a bit like bad news because the share of Europe is a relatively modest one. As you see, it's 11% of the global space economy. But this is exactly the argument I'm using when I speak to decision makers, ministers across Europe to say, look, there's so much to do, there's so much to gain. It is so necessary for our society, for our security, now also for defense, and therefore these investments are so crucial for your country, but also for the economy, and Europe needs to step up and really increase its share on the global market. We are good, we have the excellence, as you know, we have some of the best engineers and companies, and of course we do this very often in synergy with others, with international cooperation, with international partners to really bring in our excellence that we have. But the reality is we are relatively small on the global market, and I think this is too small, at least for what we should be capable of and how we should utilize space for the benefits of our people and society. And that's why you see on the right-hand side, international cooperation is a key asset of ESA. We have always been cooperating with, I would say, every country, every space agency, and this is something that I'm reinforcing, I'm strengthening. I've signed a few very important agreements recently with Japan, with India. We are in very close discussions with Australia. Just today we had a very good, fruitful discussion with also our Canadian partners who are already cooperating state of ESA and many other countries. This is something that I take as an extremely important aspect and really would like to intensify. Space Strategy 2040, this is a bit the highlights of the chapters of the space strategy. I'd like to give credit to Heriberto, who is sitting with us. He was the one within my team to put it together, to discuss with member states. And this is something that actually for the very first time, we have a space strategy of ESA, at least, that goes for a few decades, or 1.5 decades in this case, not only short-term strategies. We had an Agenda 2025. Previously, we had also 4-year time frames by DGs, always to define their mandate and say to the member states what they would like to do for their mandate, which is 4 years. I have changed this because I want this to be a long-term strategy, but also a strategy that is supported by member states. So therefore, this is elaborated together with our member states, and this is really something that is solid and long-term, and I think very important. The chapters are here. I'm going very briefly through them one by one, just to highlight a bit where ESA is guided in the future. Of course, the implementation steps are always the budgets we do through the ministerial conferences, all in negotiation. It will be a stepwise implementation, but these are the long-term goals. And we have big goals, but of course we have to be realistic in terms of funding to make sure that we do and we can do what we promise to do. Certainly protect our planet and climate is a top priority. We are already having major programs in Europe, Copernicus, but also the Earth Explorers, the meteorological missions, where we are having built up over decades quite some significant substance. We are delivering today to the world 250 terabytes of data every single day for free to any user in the world. And this is something that is quite remarkable, is used for many applications, not only for climate, but really for many applications, from agriculture to disaster management and many domains. But also, this, of course, is something that is also including space weather to protect our planet, or planetary science, where we work to protect our planet against asteroids or asteroid impacts. We have some very interesting missions. One was launched last year called Hera. Another one is being built up right now to be launched in 2028 to encounter an incoming asteroid coming to our planet Earth on Friday the 13th. This is not a joke. Friday the 13th of April 2029, but we have to launch a year before in order to encounter and therefore really see how we can measure and protect ourselves. Zero debris charter and zero debris environment is a priority of ESA. It's a very simple activity in the sense of the message, but of course a very important one because we want to sustainably use our orbits for decades to come, and ESA has been quite active to really promote this cause. Explore and discover. This is really exploration. That means astronautical exploration, but also exploration of our universe. You see some of the pictures or some of the examples here. It really goes all the way from Earth to the very end of the universe, and really see with our instruments to understand our being. Where do we come from? Where do we go? Where's planet Earth in this whole wide universe? How does it relate to all the wider parts of our solar system and the universe? So we have a very active space science program. Euclid, we have just published some images to really inspire the world, but also give a lot of data to scientists to study, in this case, dark matter and dark energy, something that is completely mysterious. And these data, we hope, are bringing or shedding some light on these 95% of our universe, which are dark energy and dark matter. But also exploration of the moon, of Mars, also astronauts on the space station. With all the research we do is part of Explore and Discover, certainly something I would like to increase. At the last ministerial in 22, we got a 37% increase of budget, and certainly this year I will propose a very strong package on exploration. This is one of the domains I really would like to increase significantly within the ESA context in the years to come. Strengthening European autonomy and resilience. This is a bit of a new domain, not completely new, but new in terms of emphasis it gets. This has to do with defense and security. How can ESA, how can space support these domains, but also resilience in case of crisis, in case of floods, of disasters, of storms, or how can space data support citizens, and really make Europe more autonomous, more independent, stronger, but stronger not to be in isolation, stronger to be a good partner in international cooperation and really work with our partners internationally. We have very strong partnerships with many countries, with the US, with Japan, with Australia, with India, with many, many countries, and we would like to reinforce that. But to be a good partner, you need to have something in your pockets, and this is really where we would like to create strength, create capabilities for Europe to have something to offer. Of course, as I mentioned, prediction and management of disasters and emergencies is one of the highlights that will come more and more in the future, and we have actually quite intense and good discussions with our member states, but also with the European Commission. The fourth goal, and for each of these goals we have a number of objectives. So this is actually the very, very highlighter or the tip of the iceberg of all the strategy. One of them is, or the fourth one is boost European growth and competitiveness. Again, this has to do with commercialization. We have built up over the last 2 years what we call an investors network, an ESA investors network, where we have concluded agreements, 67 so far, with venture capital companies. More and more funding entities, venture capital companies come to me when I am in Davos or in the Munich Security Conference and say, look, we hear about space. Space is a future economic growth sector. We hear that Europe is quite interested to grow its capabilities. What can we do? Who are the companies? Which domains are the good ones to invest? And so we have this network of investors, as we call it, where we are bringing together investors or funding on one side, space companies on the other side. Of course, there's a lot of interactions needed, technology maturation. It's a bit more than matchmaking to make sure that we can bring private funds into it. Last year, about 1 billion, almost 1 billion of funding from this community has been invested in Europe in startups or European companies, and this is an activity I really would like to strengthen and to increase, because space is, of course, serving the needs of society, but also an economic sector that is very well growing. There's a multiplier effect that is actually quite high, and this is something we really want to develop quite strongly in the future to make sure that this is well managed and well understood. And last but not least, space is inspiring, as you all know. Every time you see wonderful images of the universe, or astronauts at work, or even school children in their school classes being fascinated by space, this is something which we really would like to utilize. The strength of astronauts. I've seen Catherine in the movie before, the Australian astronaut. We know her very well. And these are examples where we can really have them as ambassadors because they see the planet from a different viewpoint. They are inspiring people and they are really good ambassadors of space, but also doing a lot of education activities and groundwork in order to make sure that the information gets to the young kids, to the older kids, and to very old kids like all of us, in order to make sure that the information we provide is really exciting. And this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and I think you're all waiting for the drink.